All right, thanks everybody. Good to be back up here. Let's see, so there have been various questions so far about this infamous pilot project. So that's my role here today, is to talk about the Falmouth urine diversion pilot project that we've been working on developing really constantly since 2023. Before I dive in, though, I just wanted to point out, I just realized that I think this is the first time during this project that everyone on our team is actually here in person. So just give some shout outs to Rich Earth, Abe and Arthur. Rich Earth have been our key contacts there. Kelsey McWilliams from Watershed, Matthew Lippincott and Connor Lally, who were just up on stage here. Connor from Nutrient Networks, and Matthew Lippincott of University of Michigan and Asset Group. So really cool to see everybody in person today. So I'm really psyched about that. I'll also point out there have been a few presentations already here today, and so some of my slides are a little bit repetitive, so I might move along and get us to lunch on time here. So, so here we go. So I think we all know this. Water quality is getting worse on the Cape. This is one of those maps that was shown earlier. But what this shows basically is that all the red dots are the estuaries around the Cape that have been deemed as unacceptable. And even kind of more scary to me, if you look at the timeline, this is a report, by the way, that was put out by the Association of Preserved Cape Cod. The first one they put out in 2019 found that 68% of the estuaries around the Cape were unacceptable water quality. And then 4 years later in 2023, that number bumped up to 90%. So the issue is real and it's getting worse, and I think this is part of why the interest in urine diversion as an alternative or an additional tool for nutrient management is growing in acceptance. So we also broadly accept that wastewater disposal is really the cause of this problem. Where our conventional septic systems do a great job of capturing wastewater, keeping us safe from pathogens, but they really don't do anything to remove the nitrogen and phosphorus that's causing these water quality problems. So that nutrient-laden load makes its way down to the groundwater, as you can see in the graphic there, and all groundwater in the Cape is moving in one direction or another, and eventually make its way into an estuary or a pond, causing water pollution problems. So the state has enacted new regulations to help address this problem. Beginning in 2023, the MASSTC developed these areas that they call nitrogen-sensitive areas. So basically everything that's green on Cape Cod there has been deemed a nitrogen-sensitive area. And the goal is to reduce nitrogen pollution and improve water quality in those watersheds. And as was discussed earlier as well, it's really on the towns at this point to develop municipal watershed plans to try to achieve those goals. So looking at sort of the current state of wastewater management on the Cape, this map again was by the Association of Preserved Cape Cod. You can see basically the brown areas and the black areas are the ones that we're most interested here. The green areas are essentially undeveloped areas for the most part, although you can see the base is the huge area here. So we're actually located just on the south end of that big undeveloped area. But what this shows and what I'm trying to communicate here is that the black areas are the areas that are sewered. And this map's a little bit old now. This is a 3-year-old map. So some of those areas have expanded a bit. But the big picture is that about 85% of the Cape is still reliant on on-site systems. So I did mention, sewer is increasing, but even, with full build-out on the sewer plans, we still believe that the majority of the Cape is going to be reliant on on-site treatment systems. And so that could mean innovative alternative septic systems. That could also mean composting and urine diverting or black water diverting systems. So that's why we're really trying to do some work here to put more options on the table for the majority of the Cape to use for wastewater management. And then this is sort of just sort of basics of watersheds, because I know some people here are relatively new to some of these concepts. So this is a map of all of the estuarine watersheds on Cape Cod. And basically what a watershed is a delineated or outlined land area where the groundwater within that area is flowing into a receiving estuary. Knowing what our watersheds are and how they work is really important in planning at the municipal level, or even as a resident of the Cape. Knowing where your wastewater goes, I think, is an important thing for us to be in touch with. So any nutrients that are within any of these polygons on this map that are entering the groundwater in those areas will eventually flow into the receiving estuary. So some examples of those that I pointed out are like the Pleasant Bay watershed is this whole area. So if you're anywhere inside of that polygon, sorry, now nobody can hear me, right? If you're anywhere inside of that polygon around Pleasant Bay, your wastewater is flowing into Pleasant Bay. Barnstable Harbor is another one, which is this big one here. So anybody that lives in that area, your wastewater is flowing into that estuary. I could take this with me, couldn't I? I'll stay here for now. And then the last one I pointed out was Waquoit Bay, which is one of great interest to all the folks in Falmouth. That's one of the larger watersheds in the town of Falmouth. So each one of those watersheds has what's called a total maximum daily load, which is basically the total amount of nitrogen that can flow into that estuary on a daily basis. So it's the maximum daily load while still maintaining acceptable water quality. So right now, pretty much all of these are over the total maximum daily load on a daily basis. So we're flushing too much nitrogen into the estuaries, and the goal is to cut down that daily load of nitrogen to achieve the TMDL, or the total maximum daily load. And the hope is that once we do that, that we're going to start, sampling that water body. We'll see the algae blooms go away. We'll see the eelgrass come back. So that's sort of the ultimate goal in how this all works. So now sort of zooming in on Falmouth, this is actually a map that the town produced. I would say it's a draft at this point, but this shows the watersheds in the town. I guess I am going to take this with me. Yeah. So this is the town border up here, town boundary like that. And then all of these lines in here are the delineated watersheds. And then we can see some different colors in there. So the areas that are, say, this bright green color are where sewer already exists. So there's some spattering of sewer in different areas. The darker green is the area where they're proposing to expand sewer. So you can see they're really focusing on sort of the more densely developed peninsulas that are closest to those receiving estuaries. And then the light blue color there, which covers large areas of these watersheds, is where they're proposing to mandate the installation of innovative alternative septic systems. Or, those are also areas where urine diversion or composting could be incorporated. Let's see, did I say everything I wanted to there? Sorry. All right, so now, it's a little bit about watersheds. So now looking at sort of where we're at with this Falmouth urine diversion project. I mentioned we've been working on this since about 2023. We got involved actually when 4 members of the town and the town water quality management committee came to us and sat down at our picnic table and sort of explained that there's a lot of interest among the town meeting voters, and would we help them explore whether this is a reality or whether this could be a reality or not. So Bryan and I were there at the table, and I, of course, being the guy that I am interested in this stuff, said, sure, yeah, we'd love to do that. So some of the key questions that we had to answer, or that we've been working to answer through that project are, can urine diversion be permitted in Massachusetts and in Falmouth? We're still working on answering that question. Are there available urine diverting toilets? As Matthew mentioned, we actually don't have an approved urine diverting toilet yet, but we are working with manufacturers and expecting that we're going to be able to get at least one permitted in time for this project. The other key question is, how much nitrogen and phosphorus will these systems remove? We'll find out once we install some systems and start monitoring them. Are people willing to use them? I think, obviously there are people in this room willing to use them, and with some help from the Green Center and the Falmouth Pond Coalition, we pretty quickly came up with a list of about 170 people within the town of Falmouth that expressed interest in participating in a project. So we have a good list of potential participants, and we're trying to, keep them informed, although it's been a long process. So if you're here, I apologize. We're working as quickly as we can, but we are making progress. How will the systems and the resulting P that's collected in those systems be managed? That's one of the key questions we've been working on. I think, one of the real big breakthroughs that Connor and Matthew mentioned is the approval of urine-derived fertilizer products. So that was, a huge win in, how we can manage the resulting urine. And then another question, how can urine diversion be used as a tool in municipal watershed nutrient reduction efforts? That is one that we've been working with the Department of Environmental Protection on. And I think, one of the key, I wouldn't say a complete breakthrough yet, but a very uplifting result there was that we determined this watershed scale nutrient accounting approach that Abe has mentioned, and I think it may have come up another time as well. The idea being that if urine is collected in a storage tank in a home, pumped up into a truck, we measure the volume, we measure the nutrient content, then the town can then report to the state how much nutrient load, in either pounds or kilograms, was removed from that particular parcel, and then the town can actually cumulatively count all of the people who are diverting urine within a particular watershed and get the credit toward their TMDL. So that's kind of the idea of how the watershed planning and the urine diversion project fits together. We can basically directly measure the amount of nutrients that we're removing from each of those watersheds, toward their TMDL targets. And then one of the other questions was, is it in the town's best interest to fund a pilot project? Our initial proposal to the town was I think around $700,000. Then they asked us to expand the project, so it came up to, it's been a while now, 1.2 million or something like that. And so some people in town were like, nobody really wants to do this. It's this fringe idea. So there's resistance, among various folks to, just pony up the funding to do the pilot project right away. So we really had to sort of answer all these questions in order to get the town, to be willing to fund a project like this. During that time period, though, as we're working to answer those questions, we were also applying for grants. And so we applied for a grant through the Massachusetts DEP 319 program, and we were awarded that grant. So that sort of alleviated, the question from the town as to, whether it's in the town's best interest. Now we have the money to do the project, and the town has basically supported the planning. So that was a huge win for the project. So we received just under $417,000. And we received a notice to proceed on that project just very recently on September 30th. So So it's a 2-year project period. So we have 2 years to get toilets installed and to do some monitoring on them and collect some of the data that we're all very excited to see. Basically the plan for the project is to install and monitor 25 urine diverting toilet systems. The grant funding will provide $7,500 subsidies, or basically reimbursement for expenses, to any homes that participate in that project. These are intended to be like formal installations of urine diverting toilets with the sort of whole collection and plumbing system that was shown earlier. This grant does sort of narrow the geographic area, though, where we can do the project to these 4 watersheds. So anyone who lives in Waquoit Bay, Great Pond, Green Pond, or Bournes Pond will be eligible to participate in this project. The reason we had to narrow it down to those 4 watersheds and we couldn't just go anywhere in Falmouth or anywhere on the Cape is that the requirements of the grant program said that we had to have completed watershed-based plans. And so these 4 watersheds were sort of furthest along in that watershed planning process. So that's why we had to select those. So from our list of 170 people that originally signed up, we have about 50 people in those 4 watersheds. So I'm hopeful that among those 50 people that are potential participants, we're going to find 25 that are willing to move forward. So yeah, let's install some toilets. So this is sort of the process for the project here. We just heard a talk about the regulatory topic, but this is basically the 4 sort of categories of regulatory approvals we need. Again, I'm not the expert on this. This is Connor and Matthew over there. But basically, we're working with the Department of Environmental Protection to regulate the management of the urine, and again, that nutrient accounting approach for the watershed permits for meeting the TMDLs. This is still under review. We're working on a provisional use approval. Actually, this relates to Arthur's question earlier. So we're basically working within the framework of innovative alternative septic system approval. Typically, they start at a pilot level, which allows up to 15 systems, I believe. Then you go to a provisional level, which allows any number of systems, but there's more intensive monitoring. And after you complete provisional approval and have adequate monitoring data, then you can apply for general use approval. So they've indicated, the DEP has indicated that we can start at the provisional level, but we're still kind of working on the nuts and bolts of that permit. We also need the approval from the plumbing board, we call them, or the Board of Examiners of Plumbers and Gas Fitters. They are needing to permit both the toilet fixtures themselves and the associated plumbing and storage system. That is still under review at this point. We're also working with the Department of Agricultural Resources, who are the ones who register the urine-derived fertilizers, and that's been the win. You know, we have, I think, 4 now that are registered in Massachusetts for use. There's some samples in the entryway out there. When you walk by, you can see them in the glass cabinet out there. And then lastly, once we've completed all these and we're ready to actually install the fixtures, then we're working with the local level, the Board of Health, the plumbing inspector, the building inspector. Promised I wouldn't go over lunchtime here, so let's see. So step 2 is, this is basically where we're at now, is still working on the regulatory stuff, but now we're beginning to dig into actually assessing those 50 potential installation sites. So we have put out an online survey and received, I think, around 35 responses back. So that's helpful information, and we ask questions like, how many bedrooms do you have, how many bathrooms do you have, what sort of septic system, are you connected to sewer, all those kind of details. And then the next step is going to be, again, working with our consultants, and I have an example options assessment report from Connor at Nutrient Networks up there. So the next step will actually be going into those homes and doing a more detailed in-home assessment and producing this options report. This options report will be what the homeowners use to make the final decision as to whether they want to move forward with the project or not. So this will provide, here's some toilet options, here's the plumbing option, here's where your storage tank could go, here's roughly what it might cost. And so you can look at the $7,500 subsidy and look at, what the sort of quoted or the estimated cost for the installation is and decide whether you want to move forward or not. Once we've done those options reports and reviewed those with participants, those that decide to pull the trigger and move forward will sign a participant agreement with us. That's what will sort of like lock everything in for us to be able to reimburse. The key components of that agreement will be that you must be willing to participate for the full project period. We don't want to pay for your toilet installation and then have you say, thanks, see you later. But you're going to basically need that. That's going to be sort of tied into the permit. You're going to need the monitoring and the oversight for that time period. And let's see, and also the other key to the participant agreement are sort of responsibilities between MASSTC and the town and the project participant. So the plan is that during that 2-year project period, the operation and maintenance and monitoring, thanks for the added M on there, the OM and M, that will be covered by the project funds during the project period. But after the project period is over, just like anything else you own in your home, that will then become your toilet system and your responsibility to maintain from that point forward. After we get the agreements signed and we're ready to put in systems, we'll start installing them. And again, this is the same drawing that Abe showed from Rich Earth earlier. So we'll be completing the engineering, design, and permitting and final installation of systems that may look something like that. And then we'll dig into the monitoring part. So we'll be going around sampling the urine volume, sampling the urine nutrient concentration, coming up with what the kilograms captured are. We'll also be looking at what's left over, and that's one of the important things when we're comparing, urine diverting with more conventional approaches like IA septic systems. We want to be able to say, here's how much nutrient we removed, but here's how much nutrient remained. So we will also be sampling the septic tank outlet nutrient concentration. As well as the volume. So we need to be able to basically look at the load that we're removing and the load that's left over, and that'll give us a lot of really valuable information. That'll also inform DEP's final decisions as to how much credit can be given to the town for these systems. And then these last 2 slides, I just pulled together a couple of numbers. This was actually based on the project that we did with the Green Center a couple of years ago now. But through that project, we found that an average residential home practicing urine diversion, and this was using the QB, the portable QB devices, that an average home could remove about 4.5 kilograms of nitrogen per year. If you divide that by 365 days, you come up with 0.012 kilograms per day. So if we deploy urine diversion systems throughout a watershed at scale, this is what you could potentially see in terms of removal rates. So, if 100 homes installed UD toilets and removed, 0.012 kilograms per day, that would be 1.2 kilograms per day removed from that watershed by those 100 homes. Scale it up to 1,000, that's 12 kilograms a day. Scale it up to 4,000, that's 48 kilograms per day. And my next slide gives some info from the actual TMDLs for the 4 watersheds we're targeting. So I can kind of bounce back and forth a little bit here, but if we had 1,000 homes doing 12 kilograms per day, that would essentially meet the TMDL for Bourne's Pond. I will say, I don't know if there are 1,000 homes in the Bourne Pond watershed. It's a very narrow little watershed. So these are, again, just like, sort of crazy numbers to look at, but it gives you an idea that, these really could help if they're deployed at large scale. Look at Waquoit Bay. This is, again, one of the bigger watersheds and has sort of the biggest removal needed to achieve the TMDL at 48.57 kilograms per day. So if we had 4,000 homes doing urine diversion in the Waquoit Bay watershed, that would just about nail the TMDL. So I'm not suggesting that urine diversion takes over and does all the wastewater management on Cape Cod. I'm just throwing out some numbers to see that it could have a pretty significant impact. Even if there's 100 or 500 homes in a particular watershed. And then so, the overarching goals of all of this are, to develop urine diversion as a viable watershed management tool, to hopefully offer a lower cost option, to, make it so that those of us who live here on Cape Cod can continue to afford to live here on Cape Cod, really personal for me, to allow for circular nutrient management, to not be throwing away valuable nutrients, to be able to close the loop and live as a sustainable society. I think that's another important target. And to ultimately to expedite the improvement of water quality. So that's all I had to say, and let's have some lunch. I'm happy to take a few questions if we have some. I saw Nancy Love back there first. Yeah.
So can we get the microphone for recording purposes and Zoom and everything?
Thanks, Tatiana. Yeah, Bryan, that's great. So the first thing in my head is there's really an opportunity here as I saw your monitoring plan for the urine and versus the septic system. One of the hypotheses I think we don't have information on, you have an opportunity to get to, is when you remove the nitrogen from a septic tank, the performance can also be in terms of particle disintegration in the tank. And if you all will pump the tanks before you start, and then at the very end, try to get another sample and do a particle and how much TSS, total solids, are in those tanks, it could help us determine whether or not removing nitrogen really has an impact on septic tank performance, which I think would be really important as part of the overall assessment.
Yeah, it sounds like we need to connect more on this topic. This is related to your earlier comment too, with the carbon to nitrogen ratio. Yeah,
exactly.
That's something we've thought of. Thank you. Great idea. Yep. Sorry, I'm going to make the person with the microphone run all over the room.
Just building on that, I think this is be a very maybe one gap from Abe's stuff earlier is just user behavior, just more data around what's happening before it comes out the pipe. Is there any and it sounds like you're already going to be down selecting for people that want to be a part of this. So is there any parts in terms of surveys or gathering information around user behavior, whether they're and also determining the urine diversion efficiency of some of the toilets, can you get people to sit versus stand, that kind of thing? Just wondering if any of that is being built into it.
It's not a core part of the project, but it is really, it's a really interesting topic, and I think it's something we'll talk more about with Rich Earth. Yeah, I think, for the start of this is actually one of the issues that the town has concerns about, because we're working with the early adopters here, and we're probably going to see, really high level performance because these are people who are really motivated. But what if, say, the town, mandated, 1,000 people in the Waquoit Bay watershed to put in urine diversion toilets, and, a lot of them weren't that interested in it. So the social aspect and the user behavior is really important, but not a core part of this project.
Say one more.
Yeah.
So you were talking about first it's it's a pilot, then it's provisional, and then if everything works right, it goes into general acceptance. And so does that general acceptance apply to the whole state, or just to Cape Cod, or just to Falmouth?
You should ask DEP. We're still trying to work out these details with DEP. The trick is, so right now the pathway we're looking at with DEP would have MASSTC as the initial permit holder, holding a provisional use permit for urine diversion. So that the DEP really wants it to be focused on the Cape for now, and also, MASSTC is not in a position to permit toilets all over the state. So I think we're just going to have to do the project and see, how it works out, and work with DEP to figure out the path to general use approval. My personal dream or hope here is that it's permitted like composting toilets are. Composting toilets and gray water systems are baked into the Title V regulations. Nobody at DEP can tell us how that happened, or exactly what the pathway is to get it there. But that would be my ultimate goal, would to basically add urine diversion to the composting toilet approval as a generic general use system. That's how composting toilets are, because it's not one system. It's not one proprietary system. So
Thank you.
that's it. All right. Thank you.